Chapter 4. I was finally standing in front of the building where I rented an apartment. Great! I could hardly wait. Abdelrahman actually rented it to me, but I paid him back that day. I didn't want anyone to pay for me and have to be indebted to them. The apartment was really big. I had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and it was completely furnished. Across the street was the sea, which is what I liked the most of all. The rent was 1,000 Egyptian pounds per month. The only drawback was that the TV didn't work and there was no washing machine. Other than that, when I first saw the place, I just dumped my bags in the living room and started running around the apartment enjoying the space and the freedom. Most of all, I actually proved that I had made it to Egypt. My dream came true. There was only one thing left for me now, and that was to get a job so I could have a great life. I immediately told Abdelrahman to look for a job for me and obliged. He said he would do his best, and that he'd already asked someone if I could work as a secretary. I was pretty excited about that because that's my area of expertise, so it would be easy for me. Feeling tired, I sank down onto the bed in my room and closed my eyes for a moment. Abdelrahman sat down on the bed across from me and stared at me. I could sense that I was being watched. Suddenly I sat up, quickly remembering one thing we had once promised each other: a pillow fight. He didn't expect it but joined in right away. We threw pillows at each other and laughed so hard for a good 15 minutes. After that, I fell out of bed laughing and he tried to grab me. In the heat of the moment, we hugged each other, stared into each other's eyes, and began to kiss. Then Abdelrahman only exhaled, finally, after 4 years. I didn't know what to say. He got up and said to me to sleep now and that he would go to bring us some food but would not be back until noon. He left and shut the door behind him, but what I didn't expect was that he locked it. I didn't have a key and that really freaked me out a little bit, but I told myself that I wouldn't panic. I would call him later on. For now I really wanted to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes and tried to focus on sleeping, images of Abdelrahman ran through my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about our story. It was so very special, but I just wasn't sure about how it was going to turn out. I met Abdelrahman through Facebook when I uploaded one of my sexiest photos, which in itself was a strange thing because I didn't usually share or make any of those kinds of cheap pictures. About an hour after I set the sexy picture as my profile photo, Abdelrahman sent me a friend request. At that time I had about 20 requests a day from Egyptian guys and I didn't accept anyone new anymore, but Abdelrahman just caught my eye. I didn't like his profile picture at all because he was wearing a pink t-shirt, which I thought was kind of gay, but he caught my attention simply by looking so completely different in each photo, which was really weird. He was nothing like himself and yet it was him. I did love that he had black hair, a muscular body, a really cute smile, and I also liked his style of dressing. He mostly wore sports sweatshirts, which I find really attractive. On his profile it said he was from Alexandria. I only had friends from Cairo, so I took advantage of the opportunity to have one in Alexandria as well because I thought one day I'd definitely go there for sightseeing, so it's good to know someone in the area. So we started to write and this went on for about a year as our friendship grew. We found that we had the same ideas, hobbies, and even life stories. I guess naturally we started to feel something more for each other, and one day he finally spoke up about his true feelings. I remember telling him that if we started dating that our relationship would have to be forever. Our promise was unbreakable and he agreed to it. We dated for about 3 years online and we had a great understanding of each other, our plans for the future, as well as our future kids. Then the problems came because of his family and everything started to fall apart even though we hadn't met in person yet. I got really nervous and I broke up with him. I just focused on myself, finished school, and was looking for a career path. Eventually, I ended up going to see my friends in England where I spent a month and then went straight to Egypt afterwards. The day before I left for Egypt, I don't know why, but I texted Abdelrahman that I was coming the next day. So we agreed he would stop for me at the airport, help me find an apartment, but I would pay for everything by myself. I did not want him to feel we are a couple anymore. I made it very clear to him that we were just friends so he wouldn't have any hope in thinking we would get back together. He said that he understood, agreed, and that he was happy to help me. However, when we saw each other at the airport after all these years, it was clear that our old feelings were boiling beneath the surface. Well, here I am now. I have no idea what's going to happen, and honestly I do not want to even think about it. Time and fate will show us the way. After much thought, I finally, and gratefully fell into a deep sleep. Azan dur, calling for prayer, woke me up before noon. The mosque was very close to my house, so I could hear it very loudly. This really wasn't something I was used to. I was also so cold and didn't have anything to do. The TV didn't work, I didn't have the internet there, and there was also no food. So what now? I was going to get my phone, which I left in the living room, when suddenly the power went out all over the apartment. Everything was pitch black and I couldn't see where I was going or even see my own hand. I was a coward, so I immediately got under the covers and acted like I wasn't there at all. Finally, an hour later, the power came back on. Thank God. I was so relieved. The power outage was definitely an unpleasant surprise. I went to call Abdelrahman right away and tell him what happened, but his cell phone was off. His battery must have run out. He didn't come back until 2 in the afternoon. The only good thing was that he brought cooked fish, bread, cheese, halawa, and bananas. I didn't really like fish, but I wanted to try anything Egyptian, and I actually ended up liking it. After we had eaten, I had a curious question: what are we going to do today? He looked at me intently. What would you like to do? I replied excitedly, we're going to go outside and explore Alexandria. Abdelrahman just nodded and said to go get dressed. I was ready in about a minute and excited to finally wear a headscarf, but I was a little embarrassed. I looked at him and asked, do I have to wear the scarf? That's up to you. It's whatever you want, he said. Decide for yourself. That really helped me. Being a little nervous, I needed some encouragement. I looked in the mirror and thought, you're a Muslim, this is what you've always wanted, so go for it. I tried to put the scarf on, but I couldn't, and it kept falling off. After fiddling around with it for what seemed like forever, I became frustrated and decided to just try again later. Let's just go, I said. So I went without a scarf, and it was no big deal. I was comfortable in my jeans anyway. As soon as I went outside and saw the Egyptian sun and sea, I felt beautiful. The whole situation warmed my heart, and I truly felt like I was in paradise. We walked along the sidewalk of the Corniche by the sea. We talked, and the time was passing so quickly that soon it became dark. Aren't you tired already? Don't you want to go home? Abdelrahman asked. What? No, I exclaimed. We've only been walking for 2 hours. He looked at me in disbelief. I could see he was quite out of breath, but didn't want to show it. Besides, he saw I wasn't even the least bit tired, so he said, well, it's too hot, let's go sit in San Stefano for a while. San Stefano is the biggest mall shop in Alexandria, with a large food court and multiple coffee shops. We went from Sidi Bashir to San Stefano, which is about 7 kilometers, but at the time it seemed like an awfully short walk to me. We entered San Stefano and began touring the place. Abdelrahman thought he could charm me with a big shopping mall. Unfortunately, he didn't. What I happen to despise most of all in the world are malls. I hate shopping or walking around malls. Luckily, we ran into Abdelrahman's school friends after only about 5 minutes upon arriving. Hi. Hi. They started hugging and greeting each other enthusiastically, like they hadn't seen each other in about a year, where in actuality they had seen each other yesterday. Abdelrahman introduced me to them, a boy named Sami and a girl named Mehi. I liked both of them at first sight, and they appeared to be super friendly. They asked me why I came to Egypt and how did I like it so far. They really couldn't believe it when I told them that I loved Egypt and that it felt like the most beautiful country in the world. After I finished my speech to them of how much I adore their country, we decided to go sit in the food court and grab a bite. Of course, we were all students and none of us had the money to eat properly, so Mehi sent her friend Sami to buy for us girls some chocolates called flutes. She asked me if I liked flutes, but she couldn't understand that I didn't even know it, because chocolate with that name just doesn't exist in Europe. She looked at me as if I hadn't come from Europe but from some banana republic, and told Sami to bring me one anyway. After waiting about an hour for this strange chocolate, we were worried that Sami had gotten lost. I was kind of shocked when he finally came back and brought 2 little 4-inch-sized chocolate bars. He was gone for so long only to come back with that? I thought it was so funny, but I preferred to keep my mouth shut. I didn't want to appear rude. I waited for Mehi to open the chocolate first, but she didn't. The girl played with the chocolate for about 2 hours and still wouldn't eat it. Oh God, the agony. In the end, I just opened up mine and ate it in like a second. It was delicious though, I'll admit that. Meanwhile, Abdelrahman got a call from his parents asking for him, so he left me with his friends and took his leave. He said he'd be back for me in 2 hours and then we'd go home. I didn't have a problem with that, except I didn't know what we were going to do in that shopping center for all that time. We actually didn't do anything, we just sat at the same table and talked the whole time. They interviewed me about what it was like in Europe, why I chose Egypt, what I was studying, and so on. I learned that Sami was unhappily in love with a girl named Dina, who came from a very wealthy family. Even though he worked, he wasn't rich enough or came from money, so therefore couldn't ask for her hand. Mehi also had an unfortunate love. She fell for a poor guy who only had a high school education. She was in college to become a lawyer. Her father died and her mother disapproved of marrying this guy. She wanted her to marry someone older and financially stable. For Mehi, love came first, not wealth. I really agreed with her on that and told her she should follow the voice in her heart. Looking back, if I had known then what I know now, I would never have told her this in my life. 2 hours had passed and Abdelrahman was still nowhere to be seen. Sami started to call him, and finally after the 20th attempt he picked up and said he was coming. In the Egyptian dictionary, the phrase "I'm coming" has a very different meaning from our European one. In Egypt it could mean a very, very long wait. He didn't come for another hour. By then I was quite angry, but I didn't let it show. It was time to say goodbye to my Newfoundland friends. Mehi told me she wanted to see me again and pointed out that next time she wanted to see me in a headscarf to be like a real Egyptian. I happily promised her that, and I was so happy to have support. We finally went home, but it was very cold, and so even when I needed a bath I gave up. I was unable to, given that my flat had no hot running water. Instead I went to bed, where I covered myself with a blanket. Since I wasn't completely exhausted, I started to notice that the blanket was stale and full of dust. I started to sneeze and couldn't sleep. Abdelrahman laid down beside me and hugged me. He started stroking my hair gently and said my hair was beautiful and soft. I didn't even think about it because every girl has fine hair, but I didn't know Egyptian hair was normally coarse. After a while he kissed me, but I didn't like it at all. First of all, he was not good at it. Second of all, our breath smelled awful and I couldn't stand it. I gently pulled away and attempted to strike up a conversation with him instead, but was unsuccessful. He started kissing me again and again. He tried to touch me too, but I couldn't stand it anymore, so I started crying. "Why are you crying?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eye and I said, "I don't want to have sex with you." He hugged me, kissed my forehead, and told me that I was a really nice girl, but that he didn't want to have sex with me either. He tried to explain to me that he'd never been this close to a girl in his entire life, and that when he laid next to me he just couldn't control himself. Told him that I understand, and then we agreed to sleep separately. I tossed and turned in bed for the rest of the night thinking about what had happened.